My name is Alexander Hammond. I'm currently the policy advisor at the Institute of Economic Affairs to the Director General in London. Before my time here, I was a research associate at the Cato Institute in Washington, DC. I often write articles. I'm also a senior fellow at African Liberty, which I'm sure some of you have connections with. And I know I met quite a few of you at the Atlas African Liberty Forum in Nairobi a couple of months ago. So I've written dozens of op-eds now, often mostly about sub-Saharan Africa, economic development, sometimes on British politics and global well-being as well. So the topics I typically write about, as they are mostly about economics, do require a lot of data. And that's why I'm talking to you today on the topic of effective use of data in op-ed writing. As I mentioned before, if any of you have questions, feel free to either type them in the chat, but my aim is to talk for about 20 minutes and then we can have a Q&A at the end. So the two articles I'm going to go through that I've written, I hope Elizabeth has sent to you, is one about the Economic Freedom World Report, and there's a second one about Venezuela and property rights. The reason I use these two articles as examples today is because one of them is written solely about a report. And I know a lot of you guys like doing this. For example, the World Bank doing business report, that creates a great hook for a lot of articles. So I thought it'd be good to have an example of an op-ed based on findings of a report. And then the Venezuela piece is a timely topic at the time. It was in January. But it adds a lot of data to it to back up my original thesis and point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the economic freedom one, talking about its structure, how to lay out data in this way when your op-ed focuses on a single report or single data issue. I'll then give you some general points to think about when you're writing. And then finally, I'll talk about my Venezuela one, about how to integrate these general points and data in your articles. So hopefully you guys have either read or looked at my economic freedom article, but if not, I can provide the link to it. I'll put the two links in the chat now, just in case that does help anyone. So I'll just put the two links in if you did want to follow along. So firstly, the economic freedom one. To start off, it's really important to give an overview of the report or data you're talking about. It's very easy just to go into an op-ed and say, the World Bank doing business report shows X, Y, Z. You kind of have to give a background. So you have to explain, for example, the Economic Freedom Report was released by the Fraser Institute, and you have to explain what the Fraser Institute is. You can't just dive in with the facts. You have to explain every single thing you introduce. So I had to explain that the Fraser Institute is a Canadian think tank, and gave a background that it's a 22nd edition. And I also said it was just released very recently, which is the hook, because otherwise if it was released 10 years ago, why does someone need to read about it now? So you need to have a good hook, which makes it relevant. But put in the chat if you have any questions. So you go in and immediately say how the report or data is timely or relevant, because without this, there's no need for anyone to really read it. If it's 20 years old, why bother reading it now? And that's the point of an op-ed, is that it's timely and can be in the news and published in a newspaper or something of that sort today. So it needs to have some sort of relevance. And then you need to set out what the report or data point actually measures. So I've talked about how the Economic Freedom World analyzes 42 indices across 5 different areas. Whereas, and if similarly, if you talk about a World Bank report, you can't just say the World Bank did this. You have to kind of show what their methodology is, because otherwise the reader won't really know why it's important or what the goal of the data or report is. I then essentially dropped After I'd introduced a report, I dropped the biggest finding from a report, which was about incomes in the freest countries being 7 times higher than in the least free countries. I dropped this almost immediately before I dug into any other form of data, because that's the most significant and it kind of keeps the reader interested in what I'm going to say going forward. And after I did the big point, which hopefully keeps the reader interested, I then dropped 4 or 5 points after that, which was about life expectancy, infant mortality, and inequality, which then further backs up my thesis, which is freer countries, why they are better than less free countries, and why we should all push for economic freedom. So simply introduce a report, why it's important, how the report's measured, or what their methodology is, and then the most significant finding, and then you introduce points to back up what you were saying. Once you've done this and you've laid out the details of the report, you can then talk about the future or implement policy proposals. So if it is about economic freedom and you're writing in Nigeria, for example, you can say, going forward to ensure Nigeria has a better score in the future and thus follows the trajectory of economically freer countries, which tend to be richer, live longer. The Nigerian government could introduce X policy, Y policy, whatever policy you then want to push that links into the report. So that's where you can't just introduce an op-ed and say the Nigerian government should introduce this policy. You have to kind of put it in the context of the report and why that policy would be good. And you can only do that after you've laid out the findings of the new data. Similarly, you can talk about future trends. If you didn't want to introduce a policy proposal from a Nigerian government, you could also say, look at what the current government is doing. So you could say they've just introduced this law that would decrease our rankings in the economic freedom scale. This is bad news because of the correlation between economic freedom and incomes and life expectancy. So introduce a report, say what report's relevant, and then talk about the future trends. Thank you, I just got that message. And then finally, in the conclusion, you have to make, because it's a conclusion, a short summary of what you hope to achieve going forward. So I said, after showing the details of this report, or whether it be the World Bank data or whatever else, I said, long may policymakers remember this as essentially a way to tie up the findings and kind of bring the op-ed to a nice close. So I just got a question asking, in an op-ed, do you have to necessarily offer recommendations? And no, you don't have to recommend what whatever government or group should do. You could end it by, you could towards the end say, we're currently going down a good path or we're going down a bad path, but something that makes it relevant for today, and kind of you have to put a call to action at some point in the op-ed, because otherwise we're just finding out information, the reader, and they don't know what to then do going forward with this. Whereas if you have some sort of call to action, that kind of contextualizes what you're saying and can, in some circumstances, make a change. If you say the government, for example, in South Africa, should stop pursuing land expropriation, and this is how they can do that, if enough policymakers or influential people read that, that's then quite important, and you've potentially made a change to government policy in doing so. It's sometimes a long shot, but why not try and do that at least?